What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another video today, and in this video we'll be taking another look at my collection. Today I'll be showcasing my Boeing 757 fleet. This fleet is very much consisting of everything. I've got 20 total 757s, predominantly from the US of course, but I do have a couple of international ones, mainly being of Iceland Air, since I have spotted a couple of those over the years. So yeah, the 7.5, one of the first aircraft types that I ever got in my collection, a FedEx example, which I pretty much destroyed because I was a little kid and didn't know how to handle these things, but now that I've got about 500 of these models or so, I'm in a much better position. But yeah, I don't really have them sorted in chronological order, I just have them sorted in 3 different categories. Right here, I've got all my 7.52s without winglets, further divided into the current day ones, mostly freighters, and then I have all the retro and modern classic ones down below. Up there, I've got my 7.52s with winglets, and then my 300s over here, which I only have 3 of, and I definitely need to get more, especially of Northwest. I need to get one of those for the 7.53. So what we're going to do is we'll start with the non-wingleted 7.52s. And the first one that I have here is this Northwest thermometer livery. This one I got from the DG Pilot store a few years ago. I remember meeting up with a friend there, I met up with a friend there, and we bought this model together. I vividly remember that day. Such a fun time. And that was the last time I've been to the DG Pilot physical store. I know that they opened up a little, one of those little pop-up stores inside MSP Airport now. I think they're by the G gates or something like that. So that's very awesome, and I know that they have other fun plans in their future, which I'm very much excited to follow along. And then this was also another one I bought at that store, the American 757, the Jet Flagship retro livery, which flew for a handful of years in, I think, like the late 90s, early 2000s, somewhere around there. Gemini did one way back when, but obviously that mold is very much antiquated, and they're still using it today, albeit with some updates. And here is an example of one. This is the TWA release from 2021, which this was in, I keep getting this and the 717 mixed up. I think this one was in the June releases, I remember, in June 2021, same month that they also announced the SkyWest House Livery CRJ 700, back when they were on that hot streak of the regional jets as well. So I really wanted to get this one, but I didn't get it until my first Airliners International Convention in Chicago. 2022. America West example, this is in the beige livery that they had from their starting days in 1985 up until around the late 90s or so. And these 757s, they looked really classy with this beige livery, and it really represents the desert landscape well, since they were based out of Phoenix. Such a nice livery there. I don't think I've ever found an official name for this livery. I always just call it the beige livery, whereas the final livery that they had, a name that I found for it was the Jurassic livery, which I thought was interesting. But this one I got in 2018. I saw that unboxing up on my channel, and surprisingly that one did pretty well. It's like these random unboxings, they get a couple thousand views, which is way more than one of my other videos get at the time, but sometimes it's just how YouTube operates. And I remember this one, the United Sol Bass example, the 752, from the September 2024 releases by Gemini Jets. I had a lot of stuff going on the day that Gemini announced this, and I found just a nice outdoor area to sit in and record, and this is the first thing I see in the 1-400 releases, so I'm like, oh my god, I need to buy this. So I got that, the Delta MD-90, and I'm forgetting the third one off the top of my head, but I got 3 planes. Oh yeah, the third one I got, it was the Allegiant Max 8, which I have on this same table, since this is just the current FSD diorama. But yeah, that was a nice release, and one of the best ones that Gemini has done within the last, 18 months. This is another awesome release from 2024, the Delta Widget 7.5. I remember them announcing this as a future release in late 2023, and I was just super thrilled to see something like this pop up, and they got it announced in that first batch of 2024, so I pre-ordered this, and sure enough, this is a very lovely model. You'll note as well the registration November 607 Delta Lima. This is the sister ship to 608 Delta Alpha, which is at the Delta Flight Museum in this same livery. And coincidentally enough, Gemini also released that tail number, but with Delta Flot colors. And I previously had the NG Delta Flot 75. I actually sold that to a friend when I went to Florida last year. So I will have to see, maybe I'll try to get one back, or I'll get the Gemini one at some point. So I'll certainly think about it for sure. Definitely a sale that I wouldn't have done, but I knew this friend really wanted it for a while, so I'm like, if you still want it, I'll bring it with me when I come to Florida. And sure enough, that's what happened, and I'll have to get one back at some point. But I don't really regret that. I know that he loves the model very much, so if that's how he feels about it, then I'm not going to really regret the purchase that much on my end. And then the Eastern 757. This one I also got from Airliners International as well in Chicago 2022. The Eastern Chrome hockey stick. Gemini did one of these way back when with the 757 tail, back when Eastern introduced the type. It was like the last new aircraft that Eastern got before they filed for bankruptcy and shut down. But I honestly think if Eastern was still flying today, I think that they would probably still be flying these 75s up to this point, just like what Delta and United have been doing as of late. But their plans are to phase those out at some point as the A321neos and the XLRs come into play over the coming years. Now move on to my current 757 fleet, which isn't very elaborate, at least in the non-winglet department. I have them as mostly freighters. Here's the FedEx 757 with Pratt & Whitney engines. This is an NG release from, I think, like 2019 or something like that. This was like one of the first releases that really put NG on the map for mainly US collectors, because as we all know, Gemini was in quite the hole back then in terms of their quality, and the releases were actually still pretty good up to that point. They were still doing a lot of retro stuff, and even some regional jets in there in 2018, like the American Eagle Embraer 175, and I think, they also did a second Delta CRJ 700, but had the main gear not installed correctly, which thankfully they have since resolved for all subsequent CRJ releases, except that second Delta CR9 from the 2021 batch. That one still had the bad gear because that was just the same model with a different registration applied to it. And then right next to that, here's my other FedEx 75, this one with the Rolls-Royce engines. Gemini has only done the FedEx 75 with these engines. They've never done one with the Pratt & Whitney engine, so I'm not sure why they haven't done that. I know that FedEx and Gemini jets, they've got a licensing deal, so if that's what FedEx is telling them to do, like, hey, you can only make the Rolls-Royce engines, then that's just how it goes. But maybe we'll see them do a Pratt & Whitney variant at some point down the line. But I will say I do like the RB211s more, slightly more at least in those cases, because especially when they fly over me in Sioux Falls, it's just super nice to hear them. Then we have the UPS 757. This is with the Pratt & Whitney engines, the 2017-ish release. This one I got Christmas of 2018 or so, or when I did my first ever live stream, which I think I've talked about it before, but I really want to get back to that. I just need to find a good time, and I need to get like some proper live streaming equipment to really get a good one going. And then the Delta 757-200 no winglets. Typically these are used for charters, VIP stuff, and predominantly sports teams. You see like the NBA and MLB. Those teams will typically use these Delta 757s getting from point A to point B. They're pretty easy to spot, and especially, since I'm a pretty big sports guy, I love, I don't really watch much of the NBA, admittingly, but I do try to follow along with it, and then all the other big four professional sports leagues in the United States and Canada. I do like to see these pop up on the schedule, and I can figure out, if it's flying from, let's say, Milwaukee to San Antonio, I can think that, it's the Milwaukee Bucks are going to go play the San Antonio Spurs or something like that, or, maybe San Antonio is traveling back home, something like that. It's always fun to see what's happening with those charters. But there's my 757 non-wingletted fleet, for the 200s anyway. And then there's my wingletted variant for the 752. And way up at the top, there's the first release American 752 by Gemini Jets. This and the second release, mainly more the second release than anything, has been victim of the infamous zinc rot thing that has infected a lot of models over the years. But fortunately, mine doesn't really have that, I would say, but I haven't observed paint cracks over the years, but they haven't really changed since I got them. So, I don't know, there's just more of a paint defect than anything. Here's a Delta example, this one with of course, the Pratt & Whitney engines. This one was the 2018 release, and I got this. It was that same unboxing right when everything just March 2020. So obviously you know where that's going. But I vividly remember unboxing that when I got home from school, not knowing that that was going to be the last day I would be in the building until next fall. And then one of my most recent 757 acquisitions, this one, the Icelandair 80 Years example by Gemini Jets from, I think they did this in like 2017, 2018, somewhere in there. And I got this obviously because I did see this with Connor last year in Minneapolis, July 2024, and I really wanted to get this. And I know Connor has had this ever since the model was released. And in fact, if you look back at his first massive unboxing, that's like the first model that he unboxes. So it's super nice to have this myself, just on the grounds of having spotted this exact aircraft in real life, and that Icelandair, they are going to be retiring the 752s here very soon. And I think by the time this video comes out, they might actually already be retired, at least maybe this specific airframe. But this and Hekla Aurora, it's going to be super sad to see them go, and I never got the chance to see Hekla Aurora, so I'm a bit disappointed by that. But at least I got 80 years, and I think that's a nice, that's some nice compensation for not seeing the Hekla Aurora one. This one's a very old 7.5. This is the C-32A for the U.S. Air Force, typically known as Air Force 2, which is just the call sign if the Vice President of the United States is on board any aircraft. It doesn't have to be just this one. But you see the winglet there, it got chopped off, and then there's one of the landing gear wheels on the main side that has fallen off. So that one sustained a bit of damage. Her art here, I remember these very well. I think everybody does. NG and Gemini did these, and they both did, like, they couldn't get the licensing for them. There was a whole bunch of complications with that, as I understand it. And, you know, NG, they had the very colorful box art, and then Gemini just did a white box release, because they did do them as well. And they flew off shelves. Like, the NG, I think, yeah, they did a second batch at one point later on, just because these were so popular. But I don't know if these manufacturers, they got, like, in actual trouble. I think they might have, but I could be wrong on that. There's just so much stuff that happens behind the scenes that we don't really know about. But I did find this NG release at the DG Pilot store in 2022, I think it was, or maybe it was 2021. I don't remember. It was one of the DG Pilot visits. I saw it just hanging out. It was like the only one they had. So I say, yeah, I'm going to buy that. Actually, it might have been this one as well. I remember, okay, I think this one I got in 2022, and then this one I got in the 2021 visit, if I remember right. So, yeah, Evo Blue 752 for United with the Scimitar winglets. Super happy to have gotten a flight on one of these. I'm just very fortunate to have been in that position to get on one of these. I flew November 18112 between Chicago O'Hare and Washington Dulles. Hopefully I'll get more flights on the 7.5s before they're gone. I know Delta's going to keep them around for a while, not so much about United. I don't know much about their plans with the 7.5 phasing out anyway, since they have the 321neos and they're going to get the XLRs pretty soon as well. So we'll see. Maybe if NG does do another release and they do that registration, I'll pick that one up, since there will obviously be a matching tail number that I've flown. But this one is November 48127, which is the first 757 that got the Evo Blue livery. And then move on down to my 753s. I have the American Transair or ATA example, the first 757-300 I got, and this one's been beaten up over the years. Nose gear fell off, the tail likes to come off as well, but it holds itself pretty well, even if I turn it upside down. That will stay on very well. And I've had that for like 13 years now. My first NG753, and so far my only one, the Icelandair 100 Years. Again, another aircraft that I remember spotting. I saw this in Chicago 2022, right before my first airliners convention. This flew in to the airport on Wednesday night, and then Thursday night, the next day, when we were at that minor league baseball game, it took off and flew right over the baseball park, so that was awesome. Impact Field, that's a reference right there. And then last but certainly not least, here's another Delta example, the 753 from 2021. They've done, I think they have duplicated a couple registrations as well, but they've done, I think, half a dozen of these Delta 753s now. Mine does not have the Wi-Fi box that fell off at some point. And all the little antennas and Wi-Fi domes, they just like to come off on some of these models. It's just so hard to keep track of them these days, and it's only inevitable that they will come off. But that is my 757 collection, a very immersive fleet, 20 in total, and certainly going to add more, especially in the retro department as more get released. and if I find any that might be of my interest. With that being said, that is the end of the video. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.